Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The soft light of the hanging lamps bathed the great room, where laughter and music mingled with the scent of candles and fine food. The guests chatted, clinking glasses lightly, and everything seemed perfect, like something out of a postcard. Yet, deep inside, a dull tension wouldn't leave me. My wife, Emily, walked among the guests with her usual smile, but tonight, there was something off about her eyes. A glint that wasn't quite joy, but not anger either. She approached me, and in an almost natural movement, she began to joke, but her words touched me more deeply than I could have imagined. Laughter erupted around us. At first, I thought it was a simple joke. But soon, the mockery turned sharp, and I felt the stares weighing on me, reducing me to an embarrassed silhouette in the brightly lit room. Emily, still smiling, seemed to savor the moment, until she said the words that made me falter, "You'd better get out." And I, in front of everyone, left the room, my cheeks burning, my heart heavy, unable to understand what had just happened. A few minutes later, silence fell behind me. The peals of laughter died away, replaced by a rustle of worried whispers. Then she returned, her face wet with tears, and in that fragile gesture, everything changed. This evening, I didn't yet know, would reveal truths hidden behind the laughter, and forever transform what I thought I knew about Emily, and myself. Dinner was in full swing. Laughter rang out, glasses clinked, and the warm light from the chandeliers made the crystals on the table sparkle. I stood there, sitting next to my wife, Emily, trying to smile despite the nervousness that gnawed at me. "Oh, look who's here," she suddenly called out, her soft voice betraying a mischievous glint. All eyes turned to me. I frowned, a little surprised. Emily continued, feigning lightness, "My poor husband, always dragging behind me like a puppy." A general laugh erupted. I felt myself becoming transparent. Every word sounded like a slap, and I thought I saw some people exchange embarrassed glances, but no one tried to help me. "Remember that time he tried to dance at Claire's wedding?" she continued relentlessly, and the laughter grew louder. "He looked like a penguin." I looked down, unable to answer. My face was flushing. My heart pounding, I felt the humiliation spread like a burn through my veins. I wanted to run away, but my legs felt frozen. Emily stepped forward, almost brushing past me, her expression akin to the crowd. "Come on, maybe you should get out before someone starts laughing sobbing." The silence that followed this sentence froze me. The guests fell silent, some perplexed, others amused by what they thought was a joke. But I felt shame engulf me. Every laugh around me seemed like a cruel echo. Without a word, I stood up, my chair scraping the floor with a shrill noise that cut short any conversation. I walked to the door, my gaze lowered, my face burning, trying not to meet Emily's, who was looking at me with a strange smile, halfway between amusement and satisfaction. Once outside, the silence of the garden hit me hard. The laughter was gone, replaced by the rustling of leaves and the cool wind whipping my face. I was alone, hurt, and unable to understand why the woman I loved had just humiliated me like this, in front of everyone we knew. And somewhere, beyond the door, I felt Emily watching my every step, a mixture of pride and torment shining in her eyes. The murmur of the guests grew more audible behind the door. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen, feeling my hands tremble slightly. My heart was beating chaotically, each beat resonating like a drum announcing my shame. Then, like a wave, Emily appeared in the doorway, her eyes shining with something I couldn't place. "Get out, now," she said, her voice soft but firm. No laughter, no joking outburst this time. Just an icy directive. I blinked in shock. "Emily." "Go," she cut in, this time without smiling. I felt the room behind me become foreign. The guests' gazes had followed me here, but now I was no longer a participant, I was an intruder in my own life. The floor seemed to disappear beneath my feet. I stood up slowly, each movement heavy, as if my body refused to follow the command of my mind. People looked at me, some with embarrassment, others with ill-disguised curiosity. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the clinking of cutlery and a few hesitant murmurs. As I stepped through the door, I felt the cold breath of night envelop me. The garden, quiet and dark, suddenly seemed immense, and every step echoed in the silence like a cruel reminder of my humiliation. Behind me, I felt Emily watching me, motionless, her face impassive but tense. I wanted to scream, to ask her why, but no sound came out. Shame and confusion suffocated me. Once I was apart, alone under the starry sky, I realized the magnitude of what had just happened. This wasn't just a public affront, it was a deliberate, calculated gesture that left me naked and exposed to my own vulnerability. And somewhere in the distance, I felt that Emily, even as she pushed me away, was in the throes of her own torment. The tears she held back hadn't yet fallen, but I sensed they would soon, and that this expulsion might only be the prelude to a much deeper truth. Alone in the garden, surrounded by the rustling of leaves and the faint scent of night-blooming flowers, I felt alienated from my own life. The living room door was still open behind me, letting out muffled laughter and confused murmurs. Each raised voice reminded me of the scene I had just experienced, the mockery, the laughter, then the expulsion. I sat on a bench, my back hunched, my hands shaking. My eyes fixed on the floor, I tried to understand. How could Emily have? Was this just a joke gone wrong, or was there some older grudge I'd never suspected? The cool wind caressed my face, but it brought no comfort. On the contrary, it seemed to emphasize my isolation, making me vulnerable. Every sound in the house, a burst of laughter, a whisper, resounded like a cruel echo of my shame. I thought back to Emily, to her strange smile as I left the room. Was it pride? Malice? Or something more complex? My emotions were mixed, humiliation, anger, incomprehension, but also a dull worry. I knew she hadn't left me by chance, that behind her gesture there was an invisible weight that I had to discover. The silence of the night also allowed me to feel my own wounds. Every public humiliation leaves a mark, a scar that no one sees but that we carry like a burden. I felt my thoughts drift to our past, to our happy times, and wondered if something had changed in her, or if I had simply been blind to her torment. Then, a soft noise made me raise my head. Emily had just left. Her steps were hesitant, almost trembling. Her face was hidden by her hands, but I could feel that she was crying. My heart sank. After the humiliation, after the pain, after the rejection, there was this fragile moment, the vulnerability of the one I loved. I didn't yet know that this return would transform the evening into a revelation of buried truths, and that behind the tears hid a confession that would change everything. I stood there, still panting, staring into the darkness of the garden. Then, slowly, a faint noise made me raise my head, hesitant footsteps on the gravel. Emily. She walked slowly, her face hidden by her hands, and her shoulders trembled slightly. I saw the glare of the terrace lamps reflecting off her hair, and in that fragile figure, I recognized my wife, but as I had never seen her before. I never should have, she whispered, her voice cracking with sobs. She dropped her hands, and I saw her reddened eyes, her tears flowing freely. The mischievous smile from a few minutes ago was gone, replaced by a disconcerting vulnerability. I stood there, unable to say anything. My heart was torn between anger and compassion. Every sob she choked back made me feel the pain she'd probably suppressed long ago. Emily, I finally whispered, my voice soft and trembling. What's going on? Why did you do this? She nearly collapsed at my feet, unable to stand up straight. I didn't mean to hurt you, she sobbed. I'm so lost, so ashamed of myself. Her body trembled in the cool wind, and I felt a wave of tenderness wash over me. The woman who had humiliated me a few minutes ago was actually opening up to me in raw, heartbreaking honesty. I placed my hand on her shoulder, gently, to show her that I was no longer angry, that I was there. Emily, look at me, I said, and she looked up at me with misty eyes. I'm here. It doesn't matter what just happened. For the first time since the evening began, a peaceful silence fell between us. Her tears continued to flow, but now they seemed to purify the tension, washing away the accumulated shame, fear, and resentment. In this silent garden, surrounded by darkness and the distant murmurs of the guests, something fragile and powerful was reborn between us. This unexpected return would mark the beginning of a confrontation of true emotions, a moment when humiliation and pain would transform into understanding and truth, revealing what we had both kept buried for too long. Emily remained crouched beside me, her shoulders shaking with sobs, as I placed my hand on hers to provide some stability. The night wind caressed our faces, but it did nothing to soothe the inner storm that had just unleashed itself. I didn't want you to feel humiliated, she whispered between sobs. Her voice was weak, trembling, but each word seemed heavy. It wasn't against you, not really. I nodded, urging him to continue. His gaze, misty with tears, searched for a truth that only the night seemed to hold. It's just. I'm overwhelmed by everything I've been feeling for a long time, she finally confessed. Fear, shame, things I never dared to tell you. And tonight, I acted without thinking. I let those emotions take over. Each word resonated like a key turning in a lock I'd never been able to open. I felt the underlying fragility, the guilt she'd carried silently for years. I made fun of you to distract from how I really felt, she continued, her voice cracking. I didn't know how to talk about my fear of losing you, my insecurities. So I laughed. I tried to hide my pain behind laughter and jokes. I stared at her, stunned, discovering a side of Emily I'd never seen before. This wasn't the cruel or malicious woman I'd thought I'd seen for a few minutes. She was someone deeply human, vulnerable, who had used humor as a shield to mask an inner storm. I took a deep breath, trying to contain my own emotion. Emily. I understand now, I whispered. It wasn't against me. You just needed to free yourself from something you've been carrying alone for too long. She nodded, tears still falling, but a certain peace was beginning to creep into her tired features. Yes. I needed you to know that I'm human, that I'm scared, that sometimes I'm wrong, but that I love you. I squeezed his hand in mine, feeling a connection reborn in the silent night. The mockery and expulsion were now painful memories, replaced by truth, intimacy, and shared vulnerability. That night, under the stars and the benevolent silence of the garden, we understood that sometimes, behind public humiliation and cruel gestures, deeper truths lie hidden, emotions that we dare not express, but which, once revealed, can heal far more than shame can hurt. We stood in silence for a few moments, our hands still linked, the breath of the night punctuating our emotions. Then Emily finally looked up at me, as if trying to muster the courage to reveal what she had kept buried for so long. There's something I've never dared to tell you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I watched her closely, feeling the weight of her words hanging in the air. She took a deep breath, then continued, that mockery, that expulsion, it wasn't just an impulsive reaction. It's a reflection of an old trauma I've carried since childhood. I've always been afraid of how others will look at me, afraid of humiliation, and sometimes I project those fears onto those I love most. I remained silent, absorbing every word, every confession. Her voice trembled, but there was a heartbreaking sincerity in what she shared. Tonight, in front of all these people, she continued, I felt that fear rise again, that shame I thought I had forgotten. So, instead of talking to you about it, I laughed, I mocked, to divert attention from my own vulnerability. I felt my eyes moisten. What I had perceived as arrogance or cruelty was actually just a clumsy attempt to protect her fragile heart. I took her hand in mine and whispered, Emily, thank you for telling me. Thank you for showing me this part of yourself you've hidden for so long. She shook her head slightly, a mixture of relief and shame on her face. I was afraid that you would see me differently, that you would judge me for who I really am. I hugged her, feeling her tears soak my shirt. Emily, I love you just the way you are. Your fears, your weaknesses, your secrets, they're all part of you. and they're all part of what I love. For the first time since that evening, a fragile smile crossed his lips, accompanied by a flash of relief. The walls of shame and humiliation we had felt all evening were beginning to crumble. In that silent garden, beneath the stars and the rustling of leaves, we discovered a truth more powerful than pain or mockery: shared vulnerability can heal wounds we think cannot be undone. And sometimes, true honesty and intimacy require humiliation. The silence of the garden seemed to envelop us like a protective bubble. The murmurs of the guests, so present just minutes before, were now distant, insignificant. There was only the two of us left, face to face, vulnerable, emotionally naked. Emily slowly lifted her head and looked me straight in the eyes. I don't know how to fix what I just did," she whispered, the words shaky but sincere. "How to make up for having," her voice broke, and she let out a sob. I took a deep breath, feeling my own anger dissipate and give way to compassion. "Emily, this isn't about fixing," I said softly. "This is about understanding. And I think that's what we're doing now." She shook her head, unable to hide the shame. "But I humiliated you in front of all our friends. I made you a victim of my anger and fear." I placed my hands on her shoulders, trying to reassure her. "Yes, you humiliated me. But it wasn't meant against me. You let out something you'd buried for a long time. We all have our demons, Emily. The difference is, you faced them in front of me." She looked down, then whispered almost to herself, "I'm afraid you won't love me anymore after seeing this part of me." My heart sank. "Emily, every part of you, even the one you hide behind your laughter or your tears, is part of the person I love. I love you in your strength and in your fragility." She took a deep breath, then looked up, finally letting a semblance of serenity cross her features. We stood there, hand in hand, exchanging a look full of understanding, forgiveness, and love. In this moment of emotional confrontation, we realized that true intimacy comes not only from moments of shared happiness, but also from vulnerability, confession, and the ability to welcome the other in all their humanity. The garden, bathed in the soft light of the lamps, became the silent scene of an inner reconciliation. The wounds, though still present, began to heal, giving way to a deeper connection than ever before. And as the night wore on, we both knew that this confrontation, though painful, had brought us closer together in a way that no amount of laughter or humiliation could ever separate. The night wind seemed to have calmed the atmosphere in the garden. The peals of laughter and muffled conversations in the house were now only distant echoes. Emily and I stood there, like two souls suspended between pain and reconciliation. I placed my hand on her cheek, gently, to wipe away the last tears that were still falling. Her eyes, wet but filled with a disarming sincerity, searched mine for something. "I'm sorry, for everything," she whispered, her voice breaking. I took a deep breath and replied calmly, "Emily, I know you didn't do it to hurt me. And I saw you, vulnerable, honest. That's why I forgive you." She inhaled, then let out a shaky breath, as if an immense weight had lifted from her shoulders. Thank you for understanding," she said. Her body relaxed slightly, and a small, fragile smile crossed her lips. We stood for a moment in that peaceful silence, hand in hand, letting the emotions settle gently. Forgiveness, understood not only as forgetting but as acceptance and understanding of the other, had begun to rebuild what had been broken. I whispered to him then, "It's not just you I forgive, it's us. We went through this together, and it makes us stronger." Emily looked at me, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and newfound love. She rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since the evening, I felt a true inner calm. Forgiveness didn't erase the humiliation or the tears, but it transformed pain into strength, and fear into confidence. We both knew that night would be remembered not for the cruel laughter or the moments of shame, but for the truth, vulnerability, and love that had emerged from the ashes of pain. And in that silent garden, surrounded by the soothing darkness and the rustling of leaves, we discovered that forgiveness is often the first step toward deeper intimacy, and that sometimes holding hands is enough to heal the oldest wounds. We stood in the garden for a while longer, holding hands, gradually regaining our breath and our emotional balance. Then Emily took a deep breath and whispered, "It's time to come back." I nodded, agreeing with her decision. Together, we crossed the threshold, and the warm light of the room enveloped us once again. The guests' gazes immediately turned towards us. The whispers became more audible, tinged with curiosity and concern. Emily stepped slightly in front of me, then turned to me with a shy but genuine smile. I want to apologize for earlier, in front of all of you," she said, her voice clear but tinged with emotion. All eyes focused on her, and a respectful silence fell. I spoke up. "Tonight, we went through something personal, and I realized that behind the actions you saw, there was fear and vulnerability. Emily showed me the courage to open up, and I want to share that with you, to show that sometimes, honesty and understanding can heal what humiliation seemed to break." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. The guests, touched by the sincerity and emotion, seemed to understand the depth of what had just happened. Some exchanged embarrassed glances for having laughed too soon, others smiled gently, respecting our vulnerability. Emily walked over to me and placed her hand on my arm. "I love you," she whispered quietly, but enough for me to hear. Her smile, now open and liberated, lit up her face. I answered her with the same sincerity, "And I love you too, Emily. More than ever." The laughter and murmurs gradually turned into warm smiles, and the atmosphere of the party regained its lightness, but in a new, more authentic way. The guests seemed to be witnessing not only a social moment, but a lesson in courage and shared truth. That evening we understood that even after humiliation, fear, and mockery, reconciliation and sincerity can transform pain into a bridge to deeper intimacy and understanding. The evening was drawing to a close, and the villa seemed to have returned to its calm. The guests, witnesses to our reconciliation, had left one by one, leaving behind a peaceful and warm silence. The garden, where we had experienced so much emotion, had been transformed into a sanctuary of truth and intimacy. Emily and I sat on the bench, hand in hand, gazing up at the starry sky. "I'll never forget that night," she whispered softly. "Not for the humiliation, but for everything we discovered about ourselves, and each other." I nodded, a tender smile on my lips. Yes, she taught us that sometimes the deepest wounds reveal the strength and love we thought was lost. That vulnerability is not a weakness, but a key to growing closer. We stood there in silence, absorbing the depth of what we had experienced. Every cruel laugh, every tear shed, every word exchanged in the garden had built an invisible bridge between our hearts. Emily rested her head on my shoulder. "I promise to never let my fear or shame guide my actions again," she whispered. "And I want us to always be honest, even if it's scary." I hugged her. "And I promise to listen, to support, and to understand before I judge." This evening will remain etched as a reminder that true love is stronger than humiliation and fear. As the night wore on and the stars shone brightly above us, we realized that the lesson we had just experienced went far beyond that evening, that sincerity, forgiveness, and vulnerability are the pillars of a relationship capable of overcoming any challenge. And in that silent garden, surrounded by newfound peace and the gentleness of the night wind, we knew that we had weathered the storm together, more united than ever, ready to face each tomorrow with renewed love and deep trust.